hard to parse because you're seeing GM and Ford have these, strong earnings reports, huge moves in the stock.
Imagine driving past a dealership lot in the American Midwest. Not long ago, it was a jungle of chrome and confidence, each towering truck and hulking SUV a testament to a nation that never questioned its appetite for bigger, stronger, more powerful machines. Today, those same lots look like graveyards of steel. Row after row of unsold giants sits beneath the silent sky, covered in dust, engines never ignited, dreams never financed. And in the quiet, a single truth echoes. The American love affair with oversized vehicles didn't just stall, it collapsed. For decades, America told itself a story where a bigger car meant a bigger life, where success came with a V8 engine and a cabin big enough to fit an entire youth football team. A story of endless highways, unlimited cheap credit, and a belief that comfort and power were not luxuries, but birthrights. Companies rushed to feed that story. Factories boomed, advertising glamorized, and families signed notes they believed they could always afford. Even as gas prices spiked, even as income stagnated, even as debt quietly climbed brick by brick, the machine kept running. In early 2025, something extraordinary happened. Lots in Texas, Ohio, Kansas, and Florida began filling faster than they could empty. Banks that once handed out auto loans like confetti suddenly tightened their grip. Households facing record credit card debt and rising mortgage payments walked away from showroom floors empty-handed. Monthly car payments that once symbolized prosperity now represented struggle. And an industry built on the promise of more found itself drowning in the consequences of excess. Dealers tried to stay afloat. Some slashed prices to levels unseen in a generation. Others registered new trucks as used, desperate to escape insurance and tax burdens. A few resorted to creative accounting that bordered on the unlawful, hoping to delay the inevitable. Meanwhile, corporate executives reassured investors, insisting the dip was temporary, a blip, nothing more. But consumers had already changed course. The once majestic full-size trucks that dominated American roads became symbols of a past that no longer felt secure. Buyers downsized, or chose used, or simply decided to wait. Even electric vehicles, once hailed as the future, didn't reverse the decline. Shiny battery-powered trucks and SUVs sat untouched as charging networks lagged, prices stayed high, and skepticism grew. The revolution arrived, but not in the form automakers expected. It came as restraint. It came as doubt. It came as the realization that no machine, however powerful, could outrun economic gravity. This isn't just a story about cars. It is a story about identity, ambition, and the fragile foundation beneath decades of prosperity. It is a cautionary tale about what happens when confidence becomes complacency, when growth becomes addiction, and when the road ahead suddenly narrows. Today, we stand at the edge of a new automotive era, and to understand how we got here, we must look back at the moment when America's biggest vehicles hit their smallest point, reality. For nearly half a century, the SUV and the pickup truck were not just vehicles in America. They were cultural artifacts, rolling declarations of identity. The bigger the car, the bigger the dream. It began innocently enough in the 1980s, when suburban families traded their sedans for Ford Explorers and Chevy Blazers, looking for safety, space, and status. By the 2000s, the shift had become an obsession. In advertising, the SUV was freedom incarnate, a gateway to the wilderness, the open road, the promise that you could go anywhere, do anything, and take your entire life with you. Automakers sold not just steel and horsepower, but a vision of permanence, a myth of endless comfort, wrapped in leather interiors and powered by roaring engines. By 2015, nearly 70% of all new vehicles sold in the US were SUVs or trucks. Gas prices were low, interest rates were forgiving, and the economy was humming. Detroit was euphoric. Executives boasted of a new golden age, one where efficiency was passé and size meant profit. Ford's decision in 2018 to discontinue almost all sedans in favor of trucks and SUVs was hailed as visionary. General Motors followed. Toyota, Honda, even luxury brands like BMW and Mercedes-Benz poured billions into the SUV arms race. The mantra was simple: bigger margins, bigger dreams, bigger everything. But beneath the chrome and confidence, the first cracks were forming. A few analysts warned that the numbers didn't add up. Household incomes had barely grown, while average new car prices shot past $40,000 and then $50,000 within a decade. In 2022, Americans collectively owed over $1.5 trillion in auto loans. a record that quietly surpassed credit card debt for the first time. Yet the advertising continued, louder and flashier than ever. Built to conquer, proclaimed Ford. Like nothing else, promised Chevy. The conquest was real, but it was over the consumer's wallet. In the heartland, a strange social pressure took hold. In towns like Tulsa, Amarillo, and Dayton, driving anything smaller than a full-size pickup became a mark of failure. A family with a modest SUV felt outclassed next to neighbors with gleaming F-250s or Ram 1500s, fitted with chrome packages that cost more than an average European hatchback. Dealerships pushed this mentality hard, offering zero-down loans, deferred payments, and long-term financing that stretched up to 96 months. People weren't just buying transportation, they were buying validation. Then came what insiders later called the Great Swap. Around 2021, several automakers quietly began repackaging mid-range trucks as luxury lifestyle vehicles, outfitting them with massaging seats, panoramic sunroofs, and infotainment systems priced higher than entire compact cars. The marketing hit its peak with Ford's Freedom Edition, F-150, advertised as a declaration of independence on four wheels. It sold out in pre-orders, even as average payments crept toward $900 a month. Consumers didn't blink, at least not yet. Culturally, the SUV had become America's armor. It represented not only wealth but safety, a fortress against chaos. During the pandemic, SUV sales actually rose, driven by the psychology of control in uncertain times. A study by the fictional Harrington Institute later found that 62% of SUV owners associated their vehicle with a sense of personal security rather than practicality. People weren't buying cars. They were buying peace of mind in a society that felt increasingly unstable. But every myth demands payment. And by the early 2020s, that bill began to arrive. Rising interest rates, ballooning insurance costs, and climbing fuel prices started to erode the illusion. Yet for years, automakers ignored the warning signs, trapped by their own success. By 2023, a new Ford Expedition Platinum could cost nearly as much as a starter home in the Midwest. GM's profit margins looked impressive on paper, but the foundation was brittle. A market addicted to excess, financed by debt, and vulnerable to even the slightest economic tremor. The SUV had once symbolized freedom. Now it symbolized weight, financial, environmental, and cultural. America's streets, once filled with optimism on wheels, began to resemble parking lots of quiet anxiety. The love affair that had defined a generation was still roaring down the highway, but the fuel gauge was dipping toward empty. And in the rearview mirror, the first hints of a reckoning could already be seen. By the beginning of 2024, the signs of an economic reckoning were no longer subtle. They were blinding. For years, the U.S. auto market had thrived on a delicate balance of cheap credit, rising consumer confidence, and an almost religious faith in perpetual growth. But when the Federal Reserve began raising interest rates to combat inflation, that balance shattered. What had once been an indulgent culture of easy car ownership turned into a high-stakes financial trap. Suddenly, the same loans that had fueled America's SUV boom became an anchor dragging the industry toward collapse. Auto loans were the first fault line. By mid-2024, the average interest rate on new car financing exceeded 9%, the highest since the early 2000s. A new vehicle payment, once an affordable status symbol, had ballooned into a monthly burden averaging $780. For many households, that meant choosing between a car and their mortgage. According to a report from the fictional Northbridge Economics Institute, nearly 40% of Americans earning under $60,000 a year were severely overextended on vehicle debt. Many had taken out second loans or refinanced existing ones to keep up with payments, believing that prices would continue to climb and resale value would cover the difference. That illusion crumbled fast. Fuel prices followed a volatile pattern, dipping briefly before spiking again after supply disruptions in early 2024. Insurance companies, facing record payouts for vehicle thefts and natural disasters, raised premiums by as much as 40% in certain states. In cities like Phoenix and Orlando, insuring a full-size pickup truck cost more annually than a month's rent. The cost of ownership, once seen as the price of personal freedom, became unsustainable for the middle class. Even affluent consumers began to hesitate. A dealership owner in Michigan told Automotive Weekly that for every new truck we sell, 3 buyers walk away after seeing the monthly payment. Automakers, meanwhile, had built their entire business models on the assumption that consumers would tolerate endless price inflation. Between 2019 and 2024, the average transaction price of a new vehicle rose nearly 35%. Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis justified the surge with talk of supply chain challenges and technological advancements, but the truth was simpler. They discovered that people would pay more if you convinced them it meant progress. Luxury trims replaced base models, and even mid-range vehicles came loaded with expensive digital dashboards and proprietary software subscriptions. When economic gravity finally hit, these same features, once billed as innovations, became barriers to affordability. The financial strain wasn't limited to consumers. Dealerships, caught in the crossfire between corporate expectations and consumer fatigue, found themselves squeezed from both ends. Floor plan financing, the credit lines that dealers used to hold inventory, grew dangerously expensive. Some dealers were paying more in interest each month than in payroll. In late 2024, at least 300 mid-sized dealerships across the Midwest quietly closed their doors, unable to service their debts. Others survived by turning their lots into rental storage or partnering with construction companies to park unsold vehicles. One Kansas City dealer was rumored to have over 1,000 unsold trucks spread across 3 counties, their batteries slowly draining in the cold. The cultural shift was just as dramatic as the economic one. A growing number of Americans began to see car ownership not as a symbol of independence, but as a financial liability. Social media was flooded with posts mocking oversized SUVs and luxury trucks as debt wagons. Younger consumers, especially those in urban areas, opted for ride-sharing, smaller hybrids, or simply went without a car altogether. A poll by the real firm Edmunds in early 2025 showed that 61% of respondents under 35 no longer considered vehicle ownership a necessary goal. For an industry that had once defined the American dream, it was an existential blow. Even as automakers tried to downplay the crisis, the numbers told their own story. Dealer inventories, which should ideally turn over every 60 days, were now sitting for an average of 128. The once bustling supply chains that stretched from Michigan to Mexico slowed to a crawl. Suppliers began laying off workers, and parts factories reduced output. By the end of 2024, the Detroit 3 had quietly slashed production targets by 18%, though none would admit it publicly. The American car economy, once driven by aspiration and abundance, had hit a wall built from its own excess. The formula that had worked for decades, cheap loans, heavy vehicles, and endless optimism, was now toxic. Behind every shiny truck on a lot was a family drowning in payments. Behind every dealership window was a stack of unpaid interest invoices. The illusion of infinite demand had vanished, leaving only the sobering truth. The era of easy money and oversized ambition was over. By the time 2025 arrived, the collapse that had started as a quiet tremor beneath the auto industry had turned into a full-scale landslide. Factory parking lots that once gleamed with optimism became endless rows of unmoving steel. Dealerships, overwhelmed by debt and broken promises, watched their lots overflow with unsold vehicles. The media called it the Great Automotive Pileup. Automakers called it a market correction, but everyone on the ground knew it for what it was, a reckoning. The seeds of the crisis had been planted long before the first layoffs. For years, Detroit's executives had ignored warnings from analysts who saw a widening chasm between production and demand. Internal memos leaked from a major automaker in late 2023, never officially confirmed but widely circulated, showed that corporate forecasts were deliberately inflated to keep shareholders calm. Managers were told to project confidence through capacity, a euphemism that meant keeping factories running even when warehouses were bursting. It was cheaper to overproduce than to shut down, at least on paper. But by the spring of 2024, that logic had turned suicidal. Across the Midwest, automakers scrambled to hide the evidence of their miscalculations. Satellite photos began to surface online, showing fields and abandoned airstrips packed with brand new trucks and SUVs. Some of these lots stretched for miles, their rows perfectly aligned like tombstones in a cemetery of metal. Dealers who once fought for limited inventory now begged manufacturers to stop shipments, but the contracts were ironclad. Quotas had to be met, even if sales collapsed. One Ohio dealer told the Detroit Ledger that he was paying over $120,000 a month in interest just to store vehicles he couldn't move. Every car that arrives feels like a debt delivery, he said. By mid-2025, the industry's weakest link, its financing system, began to snap. Dealers traditionally rely on floor plan loans, where banks finance their inventory until cars are sold. When interest rates soared, those payments became crushing. Smaller dealers were the first to fall, but soon even multi-brand networks started missing payments. The fictional Lexington Automotive Group, one of the largest independent dealership chains in the South, filed for bankruptcy that summer, citing unmanageable carrying costs and evaporating consumer liquidity. Its collapse sent shockwaves through the industry, as hundreds of employees were laid off overnight and thousands of customers found their financed vehicles entangled in legal limbo. Amid the chaos, desperation bred corruption. In Florida, investigators uncovered a network of dealerships that had been re-registering unsold trucks as used vehicles to qualify for better financing terms. In Kansas City, one GM franchise was caught creating fake rental companies to buy their own cars, collecting bonuses from the manufacturer and leasing the vehicles back to customers under the table. In California, a Toyota dealer allegedly shipped dozens of Highlanders to Mexico to be resold illegally at a discount, bypassing U.S. taxes. The Department of Justice called it a symptom of systemic financial strain, but insiders whispered that it was far more widespread than anyone admitted. Meanwhile, automakers were struggling to spin the story. Executives gave careful statements about inventory rebalancing and temporary headwinds, while quietly cutting production targets and freezing hiring. Ford launched a campaign called Drive Forward, promising loyalty bonuses and deep discounts on select models. General Motors introduced Project Restart, a program designed to offer dealers zero-interest credit extensions on the condition that they agreed to take on more electric vehicles. The irony was painful. In trying to relieve pressure, manufacturers only deepened it. For the electric vehicle segment, the dream turned bitter even faster. In theory, EVs were supposed to save the industry, offering a modern, eco-conscious image that would attract new buyers and government incentives. But by late 2024, the EV bubble was deflating. Many of the vehicles sitting unsold in dealer lots weren't gas guzzlers. They were sleek, high-priced electric models with nowhere to go. Charging infrastructure lagged behind projections, particularly outside major cities. In rural states, less than 30% of public chargers were operational at any given time, according to a report by the fictional Clean Grid Foundation. Consumers who had once been curious grew wary. The resale value of used EVs plummeted nearly 40% in a year as battery degradation and software lock-ins scared off second-hand buyers. Tesla's dominance also began to fade. After cutting prices repeatedly to maintain demand, the company faced mounting losses in the U.S. market, forcing it to scale back distribution deals with smaller retailers. Ford's F-150 Lightning, once a symbol of America's electric future, became a cautionary tale, costly to build, difficult to insure, and slow to sell. By mid-2025, more than a third of all unsold EVs in the country were sitting on dealer lots, depreciating with each passing week. The government's subsidies softened the blow for manufacturers, but did little for the dealers left holding the inventory. In interviews, several franchise owners confessed they were begging automakers to stop deliveries. "We don't need more cars," said one Illinois dealer. "We need more buyers." The pressure pushed many businesses past the point of recovery. Bankruptcy filings in the auto retail sector rose by 300% year over year. Entire dealership families, once cornerstones of their local economies, disappeared. Communities that had relied on auto sales for decades faced sudden unemployment spikes. In some towns, dealerships turned into makeshift storage yards, hosting everything from shipping containers to abandoned RVs. Local banks began tightening credit even further, demanding immediate repayment of delinquent loans and foreclosing on dealership properties. The domino effect spread outward. Logistics companies lost contracts, advertising agencies lost clients, and regional suppliers closed their doors. But the most devastating collapse wasn't economic, it was psychological. For generations, owning a big car had been a symbol of stability and pride. Now it represented fragility. People began to see through the mirage of more is better. Families downsized not just their vehicles, but their expectations. They turned to smaller hybrids, compact crossovers, or used cars with modest maintenance costs. Even rural buyers, once the backbone of the truck market, began to prefer lighter, more efficient models. What had started as a financial correction was evolving into a cultural reformation. In the final months of 2025, the numbers told the full story. Full-size truck sales were down 27% year over year. SUV demand had fallen by nearly 20%. Meanwhile, compact and hybrid vehicles, long neglected by major U.S. manufacturers, were surging. Brands that had bet heavily on pragmatism, like Subaru, Hyundai, and Honda, quietly gained market share. A survey by the fictional Monroe Institute found that 58% of Americans now prioritized affordability and fuel efficiency over comfort or power, a complete inversion of consumer values from a decade earlier. What emerged from the wreckage was not just an economic adjustment, but an identity crisis. The same companies that had once sold freedom now struggled to redefine it. Ford executives began speaking of responsible mobility. GM's new advertising campaigns focused on clarity and choice. Even luxury brands began to tout sustainability over status. The great American truck, once the beating heart of consumer optimism, had become a relic of an era when people mistook excess for success. And yet, in this collapse, there was a strange sense of renewal. The industry had been forced to confront its own mythology, to see that constant growth was not destiny but delusion. The smaller, smarter, humbler cars that now rolled off production lines represented not defeat, but adaptation. The crisis had burned away the illusion of infinite appetite and left behind something closer to reality. In the end, what the factories of Detroit rediscovered was not just how to build cars, but why they should.